Everyone knows Friday the 13th Part 2 is the one where Jason finally shows up.
They're here.
The killer rises from the lake, puts on the hockey mask, and the legend begins. But not so fast, because there's no hockey mask in this movie either. The mask everyone pictures, still one more film to go, and we'll get there next week. But in 1984, 5 years after his mother was beheaded on the shores of Crystal Lake, Jason emerges with a dirty burlap sack over his head, one eye hole cut out, looking less like a horror icon and more like something that crawled out of a scarecrow's nightmare. And the way our heroine finally stops him isn't a machete to the skull. It's a costume change. She puts on his dead mother's sweater and pretends to be Mommy. So how did this film that gave us a sack-headed mama's boy, one that movie critics wrote off as a cheap retread, quietly do the single most important job in the entire franchise? How did Friday the 13th Part 2 take a background corpse from the first film and turn him into the killer who'd headline 11 more movies? Let's look at Friday the 13th Part 2. We ended Part 1 kind of on a lie, because the original Friday the 13th told you Jason Voorhees was dead, that he drowned in 1957 and he's gone. And then a rotted little boy erupted from the lake, dragged Alice under, and the film smirked and rolled credits. Is it a dream? Is it not a dream? The movie refused to say. Part 2 opens by answering that question. We find Alice, played by Adrienne King, back from the original, alive, rattled, and trying to move on. And the film does something genuinely cold here. It murders her in the opening sequence. An ice pick to the temple in her own kitchen, with Mrs. Voorhees' severed head sitting in her refrigerator as a housewarming gift. The final girl who survived, who earned the last frame of the first movie, gets executed in the first 10 minutes of the second one. This is the franchise's cruelest, truest thesis, stated right away, that surviving a Friday the 13th movie is not a happy ending. It's just a down payment on future pain. And now the movie has to explain who did that, and the answer is a corpse we last saw as a hallucination. Steve Miner takes over the director's chair here from Sean Cunningham, and writer Ron Kurtz inherits a very specific problem. The first film's monster was a grieving mother, and she got decapitated, so that's out. The twist that made Part 1 work also blew up the franchise's future. And Kurtz has to perform a resurrection, but not of a body, of an entire premise. And the setup here is kind of tongue-in-cheek. Camp Crystal Lake itself is still closed. It's still Camp Blood and still cursed. 5 years later. So the movie opens a different camp, right next door, sharing the same water. A counselor training center run by Paul Holt, with our real lead Jenny Field at his side. It's Camp Crystal Lake adjacent. The franchise found a loophole in its own mythology. You can't reopen the cursed camp over and over, so just open the one across the lake and let the curse walk over a little bit. And before the counselors can get comfortable, the franchise wheels out its greatest returning player, Crazy Ralph. Walt Gorney back on the bicycle, back with the only accurate weather forecast in the whole series. You're all doomed.
You're all doomed.
Ralph was right in 1979, and he's right in 1984. Ralph's kind of always right. He's the patron saint of this franchise, a prophet on two wheels, and he has exactly one job, to tell the pretty young people that death is coming, and then to be completely ignored. But here's where 1984 gets really mean. We knew this day would come, and we hated it anyway. Ralph survived the original. He warned 2 entire casts, and this time, the woods he tried to save everyone from finally took him. Guarded against a tree, mid-warning, still doomed, and still right. He goes to his grave undefeated on the facts, but finally defeated on the follow-through. Pour one out for Ralph, because he told them. He always told them. Pretty much he only told them. Ralph dying is the movie's way of announcing the rules have changed here. In Part 1, the doomsayer walked away. In Part 2, even the truth teller isn't safe, and that's the escalation. And the film is patient about it. More stock here than Slash, the POV camera prowling the trees the way it did. In the original, it's hiding a secret in plain sight. Here's the resurrection the whole film was built to perform. The killer here is Jason, finally Jason. Not a hallucination, not a memory, not grief made into a jump scare, an actual living adult Jason Voorhees, who the movie quietly asks you to accept, never drowned at all. He survived in the woods for over 2 decades, feral and alone, and when he watched his mother get beheaded at the end of Part 1, something in him woke up. Now he kills to avenge her. He even keeps her severed head atop a shrine in a shack in the woods, like a boy who never stopped needing his mom. In 1979, Jason was the wound. He was a dead child, a symbol of a mother's grief. And now, 5 years later, in the 1981 film, and yeah, I know those numbers don't add up, but in the Friday the 13th timeline, Part 2 takes place in 1984, but it was released in 1981, so just bear with me and know that I looked it up. Jason becomes the weapon here in the second film. The franchise reaches into the background of the first movie and it pulls out a tragedy and then hands it a knife. If there's not a Part 2, there's no Jason as we know him. Every hockey mask, every Manhattan, every trip to space starts right here with a sack on his head. And notice what he still isn't. He's not very efficient yet. This Jason is a lumbering, wounded, almost pitiable thing. Steve Dash and Warrington Gillette playing him as a damaged animal, not a machine. The burlap sack, one eye peering out, is kind of creepier than the mask precisely because it's improvised, homemade, and looks wrong. This is the grief that grew up in the woods and came back malformed. The horror still isn't a supernatural boogeyman here. It's a family destroyed by a preventable death repeating itself. The mother killed for the son, so now the son kills for the mother. The grief here is still there. It just changed hands. If Part 2 only mattered for inventing Jason, it'd be a footnote with an asterisk. What makes it genuinely a pretty good slasher movie is Ginny. Amy Steele's Ginny Field is one of the best final girls the genre ever produced, and certainly one of the best in Friday the 13th. And film scholar Carol Clover, the academic who literally coined the term final girl, cited her as a foundational example. Ginny's a child psychology major, and the movie actually uses that in the film. She doesn't just run and scream and then get lucky at the end. She thinks, and she outthinks Jason. When she's cornered and out of options, Ginny does something no final girl had done before. She reads her killer. She reasons that Jason is arrested in childhood, still mentally the little boy who drowned, still living for his mother. So she finds Pamela Voorhees' sweater, puts it on, softens her voice, and becomes mommy. And for a moment, it works. Jason freezes. The killing machine short circuits because the frightened boy underneath still listens to his mother. Is it a little ridiculous? Yeah, of course it is, but it's Friday the 13th. The illusion breaks the second... This illusion breaks the second Jason spots his mother's actual severed head behind her, though, and if you see what the movie's arguing here, you don't beat this monster with muscle, you beat him by understanding what brings him pain and rage. The final girl survives through empathy and intelligence, not just endurance. That's a genuine evolution from Alice, and it's the template the smartest slashers would spend the next 40 years refining. Carl Fullerton's makeup work, the sack, the shrine, the practical kills, is a real object in real space. That's why Sackhead Jason still crawls under your skin in a way no rendered monster manages to do. Your eye knows the difference between a thing that was there and something that was just done on a computer screen. And we did it in the first film, so we can't leave 1984, 1981, without looking at some of the moral panic that this film brought around. And if the establishment hated the original, the sequel confirmed their worst fears. Horror was now a machine, a factory stamping out identical dead teenagers for profit year after year. Gene Siskel, back again, and Roger Ebert had already declared war on the slasher. Calling it the dead teenager movie became their favorite punching bag, and a wave of these films read headfirst into the Motion Picture Association of America's scissors. Part 2's kills were trimmed to dodge an X rating, and the gore was sanded down to keep the film able to be shown in theaters. Paramount's intent was nakedly commercial, make the same movie again, cheaper, faster, and then cash the check. What they actually produced was a surprisingly mournful story about inherited grief, a boy who couldn't let his mother go, and a heroine who wins by pitying her monster. The Panic never saw any of that, because the Panic, again, doesn't watch the movie. Instead, it reacts to the body count on the poster and calls it a threat to civilization. In the end, the cuts didn't really matter. The film still made plenty of money. And Paramount ordered another, as we know, and then another, and another, and another. And now the machine had its monster. every Friday the 13th film has things that make absolutely no sense in it, so let's go over a few of the biggest ones here with part 2.
Now think about that for 1 minute. That does not make sense.
How the hell did Jason know where Alice lives in the cold open to this film? Is he well versed in phone booths? Does he have an informant at the Crystal Lake police station? Maybe he has access to the employee records at the camp. But for someone who grew up feral in the woods, he somehow learned research just as well as Michael Myers learned to drive in Halloween. For me, this just adds to the legitimacy of the entire Deadite theory. And if you're not familiar with that, you can check out the video here on the channel. For the record, I consider him being a Deadite to be canon in this series. Up next, Jason kills Ralph, which of course makes sense because Ralph is the only one who's really onto him. But then he stores Ralph in a pantry for over an entire day, and none of the campers discover him in that time. And having been that age with multiple roommates, there was no way no one was going looking for food in an entire day's worth of time. If you look closely at the shack that Jason has built and is living in the forest, there's what looks like a bike on top of it, and that could be Ralph's bike, which Jason could have taken after the murder of our favorite Friday the 13th prophet. But it looks pretty worn down in the image, so I'm going to say probably not on this one. And it's more likely that Jason has scavenged anything and everything he could find in the woods that could be used for either survival or as a weapon. Jason witnesses his mother being beheaded in 1979 and catches up with Alice months later and kills her, but then waits 5 years to strike again? Was he just waiting until there was a Friday the 13th in the summer? And the answer to that is no, because by Friday the 13th math, which actually puts their Friday the 13th on a day which is Friday the 15th for us, and if that's really confusing, just watch my upcoming Jason Voorhees history video. There's a Friday the 13th in that universe in 1980 and 81. We know he lived off animals at the time, but I'm going to go on a limb here and say he attacked other people around the lake in between, that the films just focus on the events where campers are dumb enough to descend on camp blood. So who made it out of Crystal Lake in the first round in 1984? Ginny makes it. She outsmarts the killer by becoming his dead mother, which is possibly the most Crystal Lake sentence I will ever say. She wakes up in an ambulance and wants to know where Paul is. Paul was last seen in a wrestling match with Jason and then simply just gone by the time the ambulance scene arrives. The franchise's first entry in a long ledger of men who wander off and are never totally resolved. Crazy Ralph, though, sadly, is resolved. He doesn't make it out of the first round of kills in 1984. The first film's undefeated prophet finally is silenced by the very doom he spent 2 movies predicting. He's correct to the end, but sadly he doesn't make it. The original movie's final girl, Alice, executed in the cold open here in order to prove the new rules and show the escalation of the sequel. We told you in the first one, Alice, enjoy that canoe while you could. And we'd be remiss if we leave here without shouting out Muffin the dog. Missing but presumed to be thriving. Ginny's little terror companion vanishes from the plot. Mid-massacre, we see her one more time, but then there's no confirmation at the end. There's no body, no goodbye. I choose to believe that Muffin escaped into the woods and is to this day living his very best life. The Muffin survivorship tracker opens with a W. What Pamela Voorhees started in 1980 now belongs officially to her son. The family business has a new owner. So that's the real story of Friday the 13th Part 2. It's not the debut of the hockey mask, that's still a movie away. This is the debut of Jason the Killer, the sack-headed, mother-haunted, half-feral tragedy who rose out of the background of the first film and accidentally became the most durable monster in horror. So the movie that critics dismissed as a cash-in retread did the one thing the franchise couldn't survive without. It resurrected the premise. Killed the old survivor, crowned the son, and gave us a final girl smart enough to weaponize empathy. Everything Jason will ever be starts under that burlap sack. And next time we meet to look at the Friday the 13th series, Jason will trade that sack in for the hockey mask, and the icon that you actually remember finally arrives. But he'd be nothing without the wounded boy in the woods we met tonight. If you had no idea Jason spent part 2 in a sack, or that the film opens by murdering the last movie survivor, drop a "you're all doomed" in the comments. One last time for Ralph. I think he'd want it that way. This is Real Scared. Don't go in the water at night alone. Until next time, everybody, stay scared out there.